In the co-main event of UFC 239, we have Amanda Nunes, the 135 and 145 champion, taking on Holm, former champion at 135 in her own right. Of course, this is for the 35 belt. Yeah, man, Amanda Nunes is the greatest female fighter of all time. The only person that she had contention with as far as that title goes until recently was Chris Cyborg. However, of course, she just came off of a first-round knockout over Chris Cyborg within a minute, who was the scariest woman in MMA. Much heavier, much more muscular. She thought she was going to go in there and bully Amanda Nunes, but what she didn't account for is Amanda Nunes hits probably just as hard. Amanda Nunes, every single woman at 135 has said that she's the hardest hitter. She hits like a man, and you see it every single time she steps out there, especially taking out Cyborg, who hasn't lost in years. She hasn't lost since back in her Invicta days, and I don't know if she's ever been knocked out like that. So, very impressive fighter. Like I said, the best of all time. She's beaten Valentina Shevchenko. Like I said, she beat Cyborg. She beat Miesha Tate. She beat Ronda Rousey. And she didn't just beat these women, she destroyed all of them. Except for Valentina Shevchenko, because Shevchenko is just such a technical wizard. They've had some good back and forth in their fights. But, like I said, all champions. And she's just been very dominant. Holly Holm, on the other hand, like I said, she was a former champ. She was also a several-time champ in boxing. She beat Ronda Rousey. She's one of the first. She was the first person to do so. You know, the big head kick knockout back in the day was the biggest point of her career and one of the biggest shocks in UFC history. However, since then, she has had a mixed bag as far as her career goes. She's 2-4 in her last 6 fights since gaining the title. Right after she won the title, she lost against Miesha Tate in the fight she was winning the entire time, but then managed to get taken down and submitted. She lost against Shevchenko. She got outstruck in that fight. So in a realm that we thought was that she would be quite dominant in, Shevchenko took the fight to her, even though she was a much smaller fighter. Her kickboxing was just much more precise and just much more on point. She lost to Cyborg. She lost to Germaine Durandamy. Yeah, man, she just hasn't quite found the same amount of success since beating Ronda Rousey. Now, of course, the list of women that I mentioned that just beat her were all championship fighters. Tate was the champion. Shevchenko is the current champion. Cyborg is one of the greatest champions of all time, one of the scariest fighters of all time, period. Germaine Durandamy was also a fight where there was some controversy because there was a lot of shots after the bell and things of that nature. However, Germaine Durandamy, she's also a very dangerous fighter. She's a woman who knocked out a man in a kickboxing fight before. So, all great fighters that she lost to. However, since then, only wins she's had are against Bethe Correia, which is kind of a mid-range level fighter, and she beat Megan Anderson, who hasn't really had much luck in the UFC since she's been here either, due to her lack of a ground game, and Holly Holm mainly used her wrestling game to win that fight. So, I'm heavily leaning towards Amanda Nunes in this fight. I think Amanda Nunes is much more powerful, much more dangerous with her kicks and punches. She is a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Holly Holm does have good wrestling to a point. However, I don't think she's going to be able to take down Amanda Nunes, and even if she does, she'll probably be more in trouble off the ground than she would be just keeping her up against the fence and maybe trying to work some shots off that way. But then again, Holly Holm isn't really much of a clinch fighter, whereas she is very good at keeping distance. That is the main strength of Holly Holm. She is very good at staying on the outside, peppering you with jabs. She throws some decent side kicks. However, it's a big muscle movement for her. She can tell that she's more in the boxing stance most of the time. She doesn't stand sideways enough to really just keep people at bay with that side kick. It would be great for her if she could train to do that and learn to do that before this fight, because she definitely wants to keep Amanda Nunes on the outside. And if she can do that, she might be able to get the win. However, I just think Amanda Nunes is going to be able to get in there and close the distance and do what she always does. And of course, for Amanda Nunes, she does want to get on the inside and just land those bombs. And even if Holly Holm is throwing at her, Amanda Nunes is very good at counter punching within the pocket. Because in the fight with Chris Cyborg, they were both, like, Cyborg was throwing wild, powerful shots, but Amanda Nunes would just slip a little bit to the side and come over with another big overhand, big hook, whatever you want to call it, and that's how she eventually knocked Cyborg out. And I think that if Holly Holm really wants to keep Amanda Nunes away from her, she's really going to have to sit on those punches and start utilizing some stabbing kicks up the middle just to keep her at bay. However, like I said, my pick for this fight is definitely Amanda Nunes. Surprise, motherfucker! These eyes, motherfucker! Subscribe, motherfucker!